Hey everyone, welcome to Vlogmas Day 11. So the title of this video is probably going to mention something about feminism, and before you get too excited, I should be upfront and say this isn't necessarily anything to do with my current views. It's more like something that happened to me regarding feminism and like some of my earlier views. This is more than 10 years ago I'm talking about. It's just like something I was thinking about this morning. I'm not trying to make any particular point. It's just personal history stuff. I guess what you need to know is that I went to a Catholic all-girls private school for 13 years, yes. Not really the place for me, but whatever. We didn't really know that at the time, did we? Yeah, my parents trying to do the best for me, and also, like, coming from a religious family, most of my family either went to this girls' school, or the boys pretty much all went to the same boys' school. So, like, family traditions, I am talking about the white side of my family, not the Japanese side, because obviously this is Australia. Yes, anyway, so Catholic all-girls private school. You can, yeah, like, we have a little bit of money, but oh my god, some of the girls I went to school with, I didn't realize they were rich until, like, ages later. I'm like, oh, your parents got you a car. I didn't know that was a thing back then. Like, you know, I'm naive. I just sort of, like, assumed back then that this is how most people lived, I guess. It didn't even occur to me that having a disabled brother was a bit odd until ages later. Anyway, tangent I didn't mean to go on. So with feminism in my school, obviously it's, because it's an all-girls school and there's a bit of religious stuff, it was started by some nun, like, I don't know, ages ago. And the whole thing was about educating women, because 100 years ago or longer, it wasn't a thing that happened a lot. The women were like housewives and stuff. So when it comes to feminism, I would say my high school, well, my school, but I'm mostly talking about high school because I wasn't aware of a lot of this stuff in primary school. Oh shit, should I explain Australian schools? I don't know how many of you are Australian, but I think it's different to like the American system. So kindy to year 6 is primary school, year 7 to year 12 is high school, and then you fuck off to university or fuck off to the rest of your life or whatever. But university was definitely the thing that my school tended to push rather than going straight into the workforce. You used to be able to leave in year 10, but these days it doesn't happen so much. They kind of insist you go to year 12. You can still leave at year 10, but, you know, private school, they're going to push you to keep going, aren't they? I don't know if things have changed, though, because this is more than 10 years ago that I left. Yes, I am old! Anyway, so, yeah, I will probably keep saying high school, even though I mean school in general, but it's the same thing, whatever. Okay, 3 minutes, taking a while to get through my second fucking dot point of things to remember to say. But you know me. So yeah, when it comes to feminism, my high school, whatever, was more like the sort of traditional feminism. So not so much like votes for women, which is the first wave, I gather, and I don't know if they really advocated much more than that. Maybe, I'm not familiar with all the waves of feminism, but I think second wave is the sort of more like we want to work and like be able to do stuff, probably the more sensible feminist wave. I'm not sure, you can correct me if I'm wrong because I can't be bothered to go look up this stuff, I don't care enough. But yeah, so sort of that traditional feminism about educating women, and not so much this, is it third wave that's the problem? I don't know, I've seen people refer to a fourth wave and I'm like, how many waves do we need? But I feel like some of today's is like demanding additional rights and man-bashing and all that. It wasn't that, it was the traditional one where, hey, if girls get an education, they can actually move forward in society kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know if the school has changed since then, but I did do a quick look at the website and they don't mention feminism anywhere unless it came up in like some debating team mentioned this, like it doesn't pop up anywhere. They hardly even mention like the focus on women. They just say, oh, we think all young people should be able to do this. So I don't think the school is pushing that sort of more radical feminist or, you know, offended feminist kind of view. I think it's more that traditional kind of feminism of like, yeah, women should be able to do essentially whatever they're interested in, and if they're educated, power, that's just how you progress in a society like this, in theory. So yeah, that before like anyone freaks out, oh, you went to an all-girls school, it wasn't, as far as I could tell, it wasn't really the bad sort of feminism. intersectionality wasn't a thing I heard about until heaps later, getting on the internet, and what especially like in some of those asexual groups when they start talking about all this stuff and you're kind of just like, okay, so now I have to add up all my oppression points. That's fun. We should add up my oppression points at some point, because I think that would be kind of fun. And then here's the interesting thing is, like, I guess there are some people who might consider my school more feminist than it is, but you've got to remember it's also a religious Catholic school, so it was quite anti-abortion and things like that, like very traditional religious Catholic kind of views on a lot of stuff. So yeah, there was some scandal with some abortion pill at the time. I didn't pay attention. I was like, yeah, shit, whatever. But yeah, religious school. Very little sex education, so of course when I first started getting online, it was just like, I don't know what a fetish is, and that's probably why people were able to trick me into doing like stomping on stuff videos, and then plus me just being a little violent shit. So yeah, what did they teach us regarding sex ed is like how not to get raped, how to defend yourself. STDs are scary. We did do like some how reproductive organs work, and then like I remember in year 7 we watched this really vague cartoon which showed really vague cartoon penises and saying, oh, yours might look different, and I'm like, okay, didn't explain very much. And then there was something about masturbation that was incredibly vague, and like I didn't even understand what they were alluding to for years after that, probably like year 10 when we had a PE teacher who wasn't so religious and was willing to answer people's questions, and oh my god, I was quiet the whole time, but some of the questions people asked, I was like, that's a thing. So, you know, I think because I didn't read girly magazines, you know, I was never exposed to a lot of that stuff until a lot later, and I'm just like, my life learning about sex ed has just been like, what? Because I just never had that curiosity. So, interesting. But yeah, no, I'm getting so off topic. Wow, it's already 7 minutes, and I've like not said anything. Oh, why do I do this? But yeah, point being, religious school means they're not going to go for all this crazy extra feminist stuff because they've got a whole bunch of traditional values that they want to push as well. The social justice thing, we had social justice as a thing, but it's not the same thing that you have today on the internet where people are on about social justice warriors. The first time I heard the term social justice warrior, I was like, isn't that a good thing? How naive I was. But so when we talked about social justice, the most annoying thing that ever happened is there's this organization called Amnesty International, and they would identify some terrible thing happening overseas. I don't even remember, but what we had to do is they would get one of those old school overhead projectors, not one of those ones that go on the ceiling and project from your computer. I mean like those old ones with the light, and then it has the mirror that reflects it onto the screen, and you've got this physical piece of plastic. Do you guys remember that? How many of you are old enough? I think most of you. I don't have too many teenage viewers. Yeah, they would project that onto the screen, and we had to sit there for I don't know how long, copying it word for word, writing, dear so-and-so, we're concerned, blah, 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 and then you had to sign it your name, and I don't know if we had the option not to do it. I guess, like, being kids, we kind of just assumed we had to write these letters regardless of whether or not we'd agreed with them, and that's one of the things about my school in terms of, like, social justice that frustrated me. But, I mean, Catholic school, like, when you talk about social justice, obviously they're not going to be vocal about pro-gay marriage or anything. I don't even know if my school had an opinion when that went through a couple of years ago. They probably just stayed quiet on it, or I don't know. Because, like, there are some, it depends on which Catholicism-ish stuff, but some are, like, accepting of gays, but you just shouldn't talk about it. And then there are the ones who are a little bit like, no, it's a sin, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, so... But actually, even with this amnesty stuff, the sort of things we focused on in terms of social justice was mainly like worrying about poor countries. And so we did a whole bunch of fundraising for I don't know, where was Mother Teresa? Was that India? Mother Teresa sounded like a bit of a mixed character, but she was like the Catholic celebrity, I think. Was she Catholic? I don't even remember, it's been so fucking long, but she was like some celebrity, and so, you know, you want to raise money for those communities kind of thing. I think we probably did stuff for local Australian causes as well, but it tended to focus on poor people rather than like this whole oppressed minorities kind of thing. I mean, Australia's a pretty open country. We do have some issues, but compared to other places, it's a nice place to be. We're not that... Anyway, another rant for another day. When we talked about social justice, it was mainly about helping poor people get out of poverty, and more practical things like that, as opposed to, I'm so offended because you use the wrong pronoun or whatever. So that's something interesting about the school. You know, we had some feminist stuff, but then sometimes it's traditional, so that kind of cancels it out, and then the social justice thing was fairly sensible. But where I did start getting annoyed with the feminism thing is, like, we were taught feminism, right? We were taught, men and women are equal kinds of things, and you can do whatever you want to do. You can do whatever you want to do, whatever you're interested in kind of thing. And I was always a tomboy. I mean, a little bit annoying that we had to wear dresses, but hey, private school and they want to put on a certain image. So much better having the sports uniform, because the sports uniform was the only one where you had an option to wear pants. When I played netball, you had to wear a skirt, but I think, like, for general sport, you could wear pants, and they had long pants and short pants, and that was good. I love sports days just because of that, because I could wear something more comfortable instead of this stupid scratchy dress. What was I on about? Oh, okay, so, yeah, we're, like... with this whole idea that you can be a chick and do things that aren't traditionally chick interests, I was like, great, let's do it. But in high school is when you finally, like, do more stuff. I mean, primary school, you're kind of just running around and pretending to pay attention to things and whatever. But in high school, they actually start teaching you some skills. And we had this subject, which I don't think exists anymore, but back then was called Design and Technology. Design and Technology. And it was compulsory in year 7 and 8, and you didn't really have any choice in what to do. It was like the school decides. So we did cooking and sewing. Cooking and sewing. What, you trying to teach me to be a housewife? I still don't cook very much. Have I told you the story about when my parents told me to watch The Barbecue? That was, try to be a bit more literal with your instructions to me is the lesson we learned from that one. Sewing, I've attempted to sew a few things, but I just don't give a shit. I would rather do my zombie toy sewing and intentionally make it bad, because when it looks like a zombie is more exciting than when you've perfectly mended something. But they were teaching us with sewing machines, and, like, sewing machines are a little bit terrifying, because you've got a needle going... And one girl in one of my classes accidentally put her finger under there, and it went straight through her finger, and then she had to go to the hospital, and I was like, But yeah, no, I had no interest in cooking and sewing. We did do woodworking in at least 1 year. There's probably other things we did, but those were the two main ones. Woodworking, all we did was make puzzles. Yay! Whereas, I mean, I don't know what I would have wanted to design. Probably robots, because, like, I got into robots a lot in high school. But, yeah, we just did the sewing, cooking, and a tiny bit of woodworking. Whereas many, many years later, after I left school, I discovered that my brother had actually done proper woodworking and made this tray thing that we still use to this day to put stuff on. Like, actual something useful and practical. And he got to do electronics, and, like, in 2014 maybe, I finally got to do electronics at my music school, when I went back to study a bit of audio, and I was just like, you got to do this in high school? What the fuck was my school thinking? Like, I might have actually been interested in it, but of course now I'm too old and jaded, and I'm just like, well, it's kind of fun putting stuff together, but I don't have any reason to do it anymore because I'm so dead inside that I'm just like, hey, that's another hobby I could do and, like, just not go anywhere with. Anyway, so I was a little bit pissed off in hindsight that I could have learned those things at school if I had been at a dude school, or even just like a co-ed school, I don't know. like, no blame on my parents. They were doing what they thought was the best for me, because, like, it is a school, the school I went to has a good reputation and all that kind of stuff, and the family, the extended family is all like, yeah, great school kind of thing. And I didn't really speak up about what I was really into, so, you know, of course my parents didn't know that I was just, like, hating everything. Yeah. Probably the only thing that was more of a male interest that my school had was computer studies. Because especially back then, this is more than 10 years ago, remember, I know that there are girls today who are much more into tech, although tech is still a male-dominated field because it is kind of boring, but also I think tech is a high-paid industry, and apparently males tend to be more attracted to high pay, whereas females tend to be more attracted to flexibility of lifestyle. And look at me, I have the most flexible fucking lifestyle, even though I don't have kids or anything. I'm just like, who cares about making fucking money? Anyway, no, computer studies, it was definitely more of a male interest back then. And particularly with my obsession with robotics at the time, that was maybe my favorite subject back then. Today I couldn't give a shit because technology is so normal, whereas, like, we only got the internet a few years before that, and there was hardly anything on the internet except Neopets, and I still have a Neopets account, which, like, oh my god. Anyway, so computer studies, and my school got one of those, like, the first Lego Mindstorm sets, I think in year 10, we did a unit using that, and I was like the only kid who was really enthusiastic about it. So we were in partners, and I got like extra motors. There were 2 spare motors, and I'm like, we're grabbing those. And everyone else used the basic programming interface thing, and we used the more advanced one because I was like, no, we can do better than that with my partner. I probably really was a bit of a control freak. I don't know how much my partner really did much in that. I also had my own little robot that I was building from a magazine. He's probably still up in the cupboard somewhere, and brought him into classes to do a demo and stuff. So I probably knew more about the robotics than the teacher at that point. Anyway, so, like, did I really learn stuff? I don't know. And then the computer studies unit I wanted to do in year 11 and 12, there weren't enough people interested, so it didn't run. The software programming sort of subject did go ahead, but I wasn't really interested in that, so... Hey, and the funniest part is I ended up doing design and technology for the HSC, and that's how my bonsai with Australian natives video came into existence, because in year 11 and 12 you can choose your own project. It's just that I didn't really know how to do a lot of stuff, and I didn't know how to find out how to do stuff because the internet was a fairly new thing, and it hadn't occurred to me that you could look up anything you wanted to do on it at that stage. And I also was a bit of a weird kid because it just didn't occur to me to ask my parents, you know, to help me with stuff, whereas all the other kids were getting their parents involved in their projects, and I was kind of trying to do everything myself because I think having a disabled brother and, like, my parents having to spend so much time looking after him, I just assumed, especially as the oldest kid, that I would have to do everything myself. And there's so many times where my parents are like, why don't you just ask us? And I'm like, I didn't know I could. Anyway, wow, I'm so off topic. I was talking about feminism, computer studies, yeah, but the rest of it, I don't know. I guess history is maybe more of a boyish one if you think about it being full of war, but no, I wasn't interested in that at the time. I had no interest in people at the time, like no interest in things outside myself. I was very internal. I think in hindsight, one of the reasons I was interested in robotics is because I was kind of a lonely person, and I was like, well, I like Pokemon and Digimon, and maybe I can, like, build my own, like, you know, in Digimon you have your one companion, and I was like, maybe I can build one, and this is before I had dogs, and my dog is on the floor, sort of just, like, chilling out, yeah, keeping me company and all that kind of thing. What am I saying? So, yeah, robotics, maybe loneliness, and maybe that's why I'm not interested anymore, because I just don't give a crap. Anyway, I understand to some extent why my school went for these more stereotypical female things like cooking and sewing, and it's because, like, the fact is, females still are more likely to be interested in that stuff. So, yeah. And one of my maths teachers, I did 4-unit maths in year 12, and she did say, like, you know, like, I think we were laughing at one of the examples. Like, you know how maths teachers are always like, oh, if you have this many jelly beans and this many of this color. And I think we were having a laugh at one of the examples she was using to teach us. And somehow the conversation, because when you get older, the teachers are more likely to talk to you about stuff slightly off topic from the class. And the teacher was like, oh yeah, well, like, I've also taught at a boys' school, and if I was teaching this at a boys' school, this is how I would do it. And I think it might have had something to do with, like, projectiles. Like, probably when we were doing it as a girls' school, what would you do for the projectiles? Like, something benign, like throwing a plane, you know, paper aeroplane and figuring out where it lands, or I don't even remember. But whereas with boys, you might try and calculate the trajectory of a bullet or something. I don't know that that's the example she used, but that was the gist of it, is like, if you're going to teach maths to girls as opposed to boys, she was taking into account what we were probably interested in. And I was like, but I want to do the boys' way, arg. What can you do? We did do some stuff, like there was one where, you know, you got those motorcycle riders and they're in this sort of circular pit and they start driving and they get to a point where they're driving so fast they can go, like, against the wall, like, there's the wall and they can just go round like that. We did do the motorcycle one, but for the most part, you know, I think it was maybe girly, we did like the Alice in Wonderland falling through some kind of substance. Yeah, Alice in Wonderland, when she falls down the rabbit hole, I think... at least the excerpt we had was saying, like, she was falling through something like air, but she landed at the bottom completely fine because it wasn't air and it kind of slowed her down a bit. I don't know if that's a thing, but that's what we were told for this example, is she wasn't actually following through air, it was like air, and that's why she wasn't hurt at the bottom. Anyway, so, whatever. Point being, I understand why, teachers will teach things a particular way or choose particular subjects, and it's to cater to the majority interest of whatever gender, and, you know, because interests do tend to be gender split, and it's just my bad luck and annoying for me that I was sort of always this non-conforming kid, bit of a tomboy, more male stereotype interests than female stereotype interests, so yeah, it wasn't really for me. Anyway, so overall, I don't think my school was too unbalanced. I hear stuff about certain colleges in America and I think Canada where things have gone completely batshit crazy with the excessive feminism type stuff and the gender stuff and people getting really offended. My school was nothing like that. It was more balanced, and I think maybe the religious component is kind of like the conservative seesaw, is like, yes, feminism, but here's some religious stuff. So overall, I don't have terrible feelings about the way feminism worked in my school, except for how it worked in English. Now, HSC English especially was just really weird. Like, I don't know if things have changed. It was more than 10 years ago, but at the time, I don't even remember when they stopped teaching you things that are actually relevant to English, like how to structure your arguments, all the different grammar. You definitely did it in primary school grammar, but like then you move on and you're like, I wasn't really paying attention when I was a kid. What's an adverb again? You know, when you're in high school, they sort of stop teaching those kinds of things, and then it becomes more about interpreting the text or whatever. And I mean, it got to the point where I think for the HSC we did King Lear, and instead of, you know, analysing what's going on in the text and how it's written and so on, I feel like we spent way too much time trying to look at it from things like a feminist perspective or a Marxist perspective or postmodern perspective. And this is, I don't remember when this started, but in the last few years of school, that you would read something and then you would have to find some perspective to interpret it from. And I'm like, Shakespeare was not a feminist. Feminism wasn't around back then, and he wasn't a Marxist. Marxism wasn't around back then, and neither was postmodernism because it's called postmodernism. I just, like, it gave me the shits. Why are we interpreting this stuff from dumb perspectives? Why don't I interpret it from my perspective? Okay, sure, tell me what feminism and Marxism and postmodernism are, but then ask me what I think. I felt like I wasn't being asked. And then like the questions, not just for this particular unit, but like the questions in HSC English, I just never quite understood. And so I thought I was bad at writing in school. I left high school thinking I suck at writing. So when I first went to university and wrote my first essay, I think that might have been in, I studied like religion, we focused on Asian religions, and I did this essay on Shinto. Forget what it was about, but it was like 3,000 words, the longest essay I had ever written, and I got a D on it. And I thought, like, maybe in university they go by like the American ABCD kind of ranking system, because that would make sense to me. I considered myself in writing to be a D grade student. But no, it turned out I got a fucking distinction and my writing was just fine. And in hindsight, when I think about it, I did drama in year 11, and I wrote some essay type stuff for that, and actually I did quite well in drama essays. So it was only this English, especially that the HSC kind of English, that I just wasn't understanding what the fuck they wanted from me. And I was just like, why are we interpreting King Lear from a feminist perspective? And at the time someone said, oh yeah, that's kind of like a university level thing, maybe we shouldn't be teaching this at HSC level. And it's not until later that I start realizing exactly what they mean by this feminist perspective interpretation isn't a university thing, because it turns out, like, now I understand what they're talking about is, wow, this shit, I suppose it's an interesting exercise to take some random text and be like interpreting it from XYZ perspective. How might an extremist feminist interpret this? How might someone pushing Marxism interpret this and twist it to their views? Have you guys heard of that grievance studies expose? What's the guy's channel name? Like Mike Nana or Nanya or something, and they managed to get, like, they infiltrated some of these gender studies and like more wishy-washy academic areas and managed to get a paper published that was essentially Mein Kampf, Hitler's thingy, reinterpreted from a feminist kind of, like, rewritten as a feminist article or something, and it got published, and you're just like, yeah, I think, like, interesting exercise to try and turn things to serve a different purpose. But I was like 17, 18, and I don't give a crap about what's feminist in King Lear or how a feminist is gonna interpret that. I just want to know English skills that will help me in the future, like writing my university essays and so on. And I didn't really learn that in high school. I only even figured out that I was any good at writing later, when I left school, when I had done sort of average in my English tests for the HSC. HSC is the final exam, in case that's been vague to anyone. You know, your final year, and then you have the HSC exams, and then you get your fancy document saying you completed all of high school, and that's what the universities initially look at to get you entry into universities and whatever. But when you become a mature age student, they take into account other things, and I've been a mature age student for way too long. I've just tried so many courses anyway. So that was something that annoyed me, but what annoyed me even more, I think, than having to do King Lear from a feminist perspective was when we had to study Clueless, the movie. Fuck! Why are we studying a chick flick for supposedly the most important exam of my life? I mean, that's what you think of it being at the time, is like, ooh, the HSC, it's such a life influencing exam. Shit, hey, I've gone and fucked up my life anyway, even though I did really well on those. Like, you know, it doesn't say anything, and there's always backdoors to get into the course you want if you work hard enough going a different route, so it's not really that big deal, but at the time you think it is. And like, why is Clueless on such an important exam anyway, and such a hyped up exam? Clueless, you know, the chick flick with that girl, and I don't know, they're talking innuendos and relationships and all this kind of stuff, and I just, like, I could only watch it once, and it was just, then I just went from Cliff Notes, and I'm just going to quickly pause this video because it's going to flip over into the half-hour mark and make a new video. I've been talking for way too long. Yeah, no, I'll pause it because if I don't and it jumps, we might miss some of what I'm saying, so just bear with me. Okay, we're good. Yeah, no, and so the reason, like, oh, I hated that so much. And apparently the reason we study Clueless is because it's vaguely based off Emma, which I think is by Jane Austen. It's some 200-year-old piece of crap. It's basically the 200-year-old version of a chick flick, and it was terrible to read. I really struggled to get through that. Really? Clueless. And then Emma, like, Clueless, the movie, is apparently worthy of study in this way just because it's based on some 200-year-old book that was also a piece of trash. There's so many other things we could have studied, like we could have done, like for movies, right? They have the English syllabus governed by the Board of Studies, or I don't even know who it is anymore, but at the time New South Wales Board of Studies decided, here's the list of things you can choose from, and my school happened to pick Clueless and Emma, and I think my dad upset the head of English because at parent-teacher night, I did complain about that, and at the parent-teacher thing, Dad's like, oh yeah, she's kind of bored with the choices, and yeah, he didn't realize he was talking to the head of English who chose that, and she was a little bit grumpy with him, I hear. Glad I didn't go along to any of that stuff. That might have been year 11 though, maybe about something else, but in any case, yeah, he did voice that, and like, well, I chose that, fuck you. Making me study Clueless and Emma, I'm just like, how can I study these things and take them seriously and not have my brain fall out my ear? That really annoyed me. I mean, first of all, the fact that this government body, I don't know exactly who runs it and how independent it is, but the fact that they had it on the syllabus, and God, this would have been in the John Howard era, so this would have been when we had a conservative government, so it's probably an independent mob. But yeah, the fact that it's on the syllabus as a potential choice anyway, and then that my school would let this head of English actually choose it, because I think she was more into the feminist kind of whatever, and I'm just like, look, I understand that high school girls maybe would be more interested in this movie, but I mean, so the fact that I'm not interested, you know, you don't change the whole thing just because one person hates it. But that said, it's Clueless! It's a fucking chick flick! Why are you sticking this somewhere where it's gonna be seriously studied? It's such a bad fucking movie. Just no! You can have something that chicks are gonna be into and still have it be intelligent instead of this crap that you're making me sit through. Oh, no, that's the thing that I hated the most. And like, I don't know if this was influenced by feminism, but at the time I definitely interpreted it as some dumb feminist thing, like, oh, we should do more for the chicks, in that, like, you know, let's cater to their interests, while at the same time, you know, falling into the stereotypes that we're supposedly breaking out of. I was really confused about that for a number of years. In hindsight, I don't know for sure if I was right or wrong in that assessment, but I definitely blamed the teacher for choosing it and definitely thought it was some kind of warped feminism thing where, yeah, they, like, sort of like they couldn't decide between whether or not to break free from stereotypes or to specifically cater to them because supposedly that would help chicks. That's what I thought at the time. So that's probably like the first time that I had any kind of anti-feminist sentiment, and it wasn't even the stuff that people are complaining about today. This was just my own sort of like, why is my school doing this to me? Like, we talk about feminism and then we go and do exactly the things that we're trying to break free from. Like, we're learning to sew and to cook like housewives when you're telling us that we don't have to be housewives. I found that strange. And then yeah, this like watching chick flicks when I was hoping we would be more intelligent than that. You know, like Blade Runner as the other option. Did I even talk about that? Yeah, the reason I went on the rant about like what the choices were. Blade Runner was one of the other options, and at the time to me it sounded like it was interesting, but I've tried to watch it and I don't remember which version I tried to watch, but I must have fallen asleep or something because I barely remember what it was about other than what I've been told. And no, I didn't go see the second one, like the more recent one, because I'm just like, I can't sit through it. But like, there were other options my school could have chosen. They just didn't. So, you know, after I left school and sort of realized how shortchanged I'd been, because I didn't know Blade Runner was on the potential syllabus at the time. But when I found out, that's when I went off and tried to buy more like the classics instead of like this 200-year-old piece of shit Emma book and Clueless. I actually was like, what should we have studied? And so, you know what, I got like Frankenstein, but that turned out to be kind of boring, and I got a few other things. Like, I didn't even get through Frankenstein. I was just reading it, and I'm just like, get to the good bit already, and I gave up. And I don't even know if I still have that book anymore. But that's also when I got the Jekyll and Hyde book, and of course we know that I went a little bit too crazy with my Jekyll and Hyde inspired fiction. I own some pretty bad Jekyll and Hyde movies that I really should burn, but hey, like the one where he turns into a giant gorilla, yeah, that was fucking great. Anyway, so that's just sort of my ramble about high school and the little weird little feminist, but not really like crazy feminist, but on the other hand, there was this English teacher, and yeah, just some thoughts. That's sort of like some of the background, and you know, we end that, when did I graduate? It was 2006. I hope I don't even give a shit anymore. It's just like, it was more than 10 years ago that I graduated from high school, and so that's where this story stops. And then the rest of my life with feminism, I guess I will get into at some point. You can probably tell that I'm not thrilled with all of feminism, but I am, you know, like first and second wave. Yeah, sure, I enjoy being able to vote. I don't enjoy working, but I also would make a terrible housewife because I'm just domestically incompetent and pretty lazy and also weird, and I have a lot of, like, I tend to get mental health issues, so I would just not make a good housewife, and I also don't like dating or any of that kind of crap. I suppose if you've been in one of those cultures where, like, you just have arranged marriages and you can't really do anything about it, you just kind of learn to live with it, but there's a lot of stuff wrong with that as well. So, yeah, I enjoy my freedoms. But I don't feel this need to go around telling men they can't talk about stuff that just because you're a man. That's a really weird idea to me, so I hope that gives you a rough idea. But really this video is more talking about school and my initial move away from things associated with feminism, because like I didn't realize at that point that there was a distinction between different kinds of feminism. I, like, you know, they just tell you feminism and you assume all feminism is the same, but much like religions, it's kind of split off. Like religions split off into all these different things, and then feminism, activism in general seems to split off into all these little groups, and then you always get the extremists who go a little bit too far, and you're like, yeah, great, now you're making everyone else look shit, eh? Anyway, oh fuck, this is like a 40-minute video. Why do I do this? I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye. Actually, before I go, so it's been a week since the Tumblr adult content ban, and I just wanna, this is just one observation. So if you go to the staff post, right, most of the comments, like people are reblogging and adding their comments, most of those comments seem to be negative. But what's really interesting is that currently, as I'm looking at it, 111,554 likes versus 108,867 reblogs. Okay, so what I'm seeing from this is that actually most of Tumblr is fine with this change. And even with the reblogs, you could say, oh, but it's almost 50-50. No, the reblogs is just the number of people reblogging. Some of the people reblogging are saying this is a good change. So I'm sorry to all of you guys who didn't like, who don't like the upcoming Tumblr adult content ban, but I think you may have been outvoted by the rest of Tumblr who aren't saying so much, but they're quiet majority. It's almost always the people who are most outraged who are in the minority, and then the rest, the silent majority who aren't getting involved. Sorry about your outrage, but you're gonna have to go somewhere else, I guess. Unless Tumblr chickens out, which is still a possibility. A lot of these companies do bow to the pressure of those vocal minorities. But yeah, it's just an interesting observation. It'll be interesting to see, because the thing was announced like a week ago. It'd be interesting to see next week when the deadline is, if they actually go through with it. So I am waiting for that. And yeah, now I'm actually going. You can have thoughts about that, and I don't know, get upset and offended if you want to, but I think most of you watching this far into a fucking 40-minute video would probably be chill with me just saying whatever the fuck I want. Bye.
It seems there's no escape.